Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're starting a new study today. And we're going to take a couple of weeks, I think about 10 sessions, to look at the book of Jude, which isn't a book at all, really. It's one page. Can you call a one-page text a book? I guess we do. It's a letter, and a very important letter, and one I think that we don't study nearly enough. It is so of the moment. It's such a modern message for us. And so I'm anxious to look at it. It's not going to be exactly a verse by verse study, although we're going to look at every verse and read every verse, but we're not going to be just taking every verse in order because it's short enough that we don't really have to do that. Um, we will be able to look at the whole and learn the lessons and experience the effect of this important letter, I hope, in the way I've chosen to study it. We're going to take 2 or 3 sessions to intro the book of Jude, the letter of Jude. We're going to take a session to read the hello, the greeting, then the main body of the letter, the largest section of the body of the letter, I should say, is devoted to the false teachers. So we're going to take a couple of sessions to look at those verses together, and then we'll look at his instructions, and basically on a verse by verse basis, and then we'll look at his farewell and talk about the lessons that we have learned. And I think it's going to take us about 10 sessions or so, and so that'll be the next couple of weeks before we head back into the Old Testament for another shorter study, and then we'll tackle something much longer in the New for the summertime. But right now, we're going to be turning to the book of Jude. And I want just to read the first 2 verses of the book of Jude. And we'll start our introduction to this letter. Jude, a bondservant of Christ Jesus, a brother of James, to those who are called, beloved in God the Father, and kept for Jesus Christ, may mercy, peace, and love be multiplied to you. Okay, who writes this letter? Jude writes this letter. He's a brother of James. James, who wrote the book of James, not James the son of Alphaeus, not James the son of Zebedee, but James the brother of Jesus, who wrote the book of James, which makes Jude also a brother of Jesus, although he does not identify himself as such. Neither does James. And we'll look at the way he identifies himself and compare that with James later in our study. We'll talk a little bit more about it even today. But he is the brother of Jesus himself. In fact, from Mark 6, when we're given a list of Jesus' brothers, Judas is the name of one of those brothers. James is the next oldest, evidently, but Jude's on the list. And then Jesus had sisters as well, who are not named. But he is the brother of Jesus. And yet he doesn't identify himself as such. He does identify himself with James. I'm assuming that he thinks his readers will recognize the name of James. In fact, James was quite a well known person in Palestine. He gets a fairly significant mention in Josephus' history. He is mentioned more prominently than Jesus is in Josephus' history. And so, probably, just generally, would be more recognizable to identify yourself as the brother of James and the brother of Jesus. But of course, he's writing to Christians. And so, it's significant that he doesn't say Jesus is his brother. He calls himself a bond servant of Jesus Christ and a brother of James. Now, even if you didn't know James was the brother of Jesus Christ, when you read the book of James, you cannot miss the voice of Jesus. My brother and I are different in so many ways, temperamentally, physically, but our voice sounds nearly identical on the phone, which when we were both younger men, he he took advantage of from time to time. Anyway, um, um, but our voices sound so similar. And the same is true about James, the book of James, and particularly, and Jesus from the Gospels, but particularly Jesus of the Sermon on the Mount. And one reads James, and you think, well, I'm not surprised. This is Jesus' brother, that they grew up in the same home, that they slept in the same room, for most of their lives until Jesus was crucified, until Jesus went off to do his ministry, because they sound exactly alike. Just their voices sound alike. One cannot say that about Jude. Jude's voice does not sound like Jesus' voice. Jude sounds a lot like Peter in 2 Peter, and he sounds a lot like Paul in Colossians chapter 2. And we're going to spend time looking at the parallels between um, uh, 2 Peter and Colossians chapter 2 and the book of Jude. Um, Thematically and even linguistically, there's a close tie, something we'd be talking about all the time between Jude and Paul, except that it's even closer to what Peter writes in 2 Peter chapter 2. And, and to the point that that middle section, that section about the false teachers, is at times is word for word things that, but there are significant differences too. So there's that we'll need to talk about as we study. This is a book that it's not like any other book in the New Testament, because Jude comes right out and says, listen, I wanted to write one letter to you, but you guys are a mess. And so now I have to write this letter. This is not the letter I wanted to write. I wanted to write about our mutual salvation, but now you force me to contend for the faith. And so I'm writing this letter to you. That's an interesting thing um, to mention. The number 3 is significant, and we'll talk at length about this next time. The number 3, this whole letter is built around the number 3, and everything happens in triplets in this letter, and we'll take a peek at that tomorrow and talk about why that's significant. And then there's this phrase that's so important in the book of Jude, the letter of Jude, right at the beginning. He talks about the faith once for all delivered. Now, Jude is writing before 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, Gospel of John, and Revelation has been written. And who knows what else has yet to be written. And yet Jude says confidently that the truth we need has been revealed to us once for all. That there's nothing new to add to the doctrine, to the theology, to the soteriology of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We know what we need to know. God's not going to have to inspire Joseph Smith or the prophet Muhammad later on to complete his revelation, because it's been delivered to us once for all. There's nothing new to add. Okay, I thought this would be a little shorter, but I've taken 3 more minutes of your time. We're going to pick up with our study again. We're going to introduce Jude, particularly the way it's constructed around the number 3 next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.